I have a romance with him when I'm doing my show. We have hit it off pretty good.
Rodney Dangerfield made millions laugh with his no-respect jokes, but behind the scenes, his reality was far darker than anyone knew. From a hollow childhood to a volatile marriage and a secret 60-year habit, his private life was a battle for survival. Join us as we uncover his tragic journey. Childhood neglect. Rodney Dangerfield spent his entire career telling the world he got no respect, but his childhood in the village of Babylon, New York, proves that catchphrase was his reality. Born Jacob Cohen, the boy who would become Rodney had an upbringing defined by a total lack of emotional support. The first major gap was his father, Philip Cohen. Philip was a vaudeville performer who went by the stage name Phil Roy. Because he was constantly traveling for shows, he was almost never home. This meant Rodney grew up without a consistent male role model. More importantly, it gave him a specific first impression of show business. He saw it as a family killer, the thing that took his father away and eventually led to him leaving the family for good. There was no warmth or glamour shared with the boy at home. While his father was absent, his mother was present but emotionally cold. Rodney described her as callous and incredibly distant. She actively withheld the basic signs of love that every child needs. On his birthdays, there were no gifts or cards. There were no hugs or words of encouragement. Rodney once shared a painful memory of saving up money for a football uniform, only for his mother to steal that money from him. This kind of betrayal from a parent creates a deep sense of worthlessness. Rodney and his sister lived through the total fracturing of their home. When his father finally cut off all contact, their mother moved them to Queens. Growing up in a tiny, fractured family meant they were often isolated. In that house, silence and emotional distance were the norms. For Rodney, this environment was a pressure cooker of loneliness. By age 15, Rodney found a way to survive: comedy. While other kids were playing, Rodney was writing jokes as a defense mechanism. By turning his pain into material, he could distance himself from it. This early escapism allowed him to build a wall around his heart using humor. Next, we will look at how Jack Roy walked away from the stage to sell aluminum siding and drive trucks. The Jack Roy year. After graduating from high school in 1939, Rodney Dangerfield decided he needed a fresh start. At age 19, he legally changed his name to Jack Roy. He wanted to leave his old life behind and try to make it in show business. His early years were far from glamorous. He worked as a singing waiter, which meant he had to serve food while also trying to entertain people with songs and jokes. It was a difficult way to make a living, and he struggled to find a unique voice that people actually liked. He wasn't the famous no-respect guy yet. He was just another young man trying to get noticed in a very crowded industry. By 1949, Jack Roy had reached a breaking point. Even though he had been trying to perform for years, he wasn't making enough money to survive, and he felt like he was failing. This led to what many call his great departure. He completely walked away from the stage and the lights of show business. He decided to focus on a normal life instead. For the next several years, he worked very hard in jobs that had nothing to do with comedy. He drove trucks and started selling aluminum siding for houses. Interestingly, Jack Roy was an incredible salesman. While many people think of comedians as being unorganized, Jack was a prolific worker. He had a high level of conscientiousness, which is just a fancy way of saying he was very disciplined and responsible. He didn't just sell a little bit of siding. He became one of the top salesmen in his field. This period of his life proved that he wasn't lazy. He was willing to put in long hours and do whatever it took to be successful, even if he wasn't doing what he loved. During this same era, specifically in 1942, Jack Roy started a habit that would last the rest of his life. He began using cannabis. It quickly became a permanent part of his daily routine. He used it almost every single day for the next 60 years. For him, it wasn't just a phase, it was a fixture. He felt it helped him manage the stress and the heavy moods that had followed him since his lonely childhood. Now let's take a look at the woman he married, divorced, and then decided to marry all over again. Marriage to Joyce Indig. When Jack Roy decided to quit comedy in 1949, it wasn't just because he was struggling. It was because he had met someone who changed his priorities. Her name was Joyce Indig. Joyce was a singer herself, so she understood the world of entertainment, but together they made a big decision. They decided to leave show business behind entirely to chase the picket fence dream. They moved to New Jersey to start a normal life, hoping that by working regular jobs and living in the suburbs, they could find the happiness and stability that their own childhoods had lacked. However, their relationship turned out to be incredibly complicated and volatile. They first married in 1949, but the marriage was filled with tension. Even though they were living a quiet life on the outside, things were not peaceful at home. This led to a very strange remarriage cycle. They stayed together for 13 years before finally getting a divorce in 1962. But only a year later, in 1963, they decided to marry each other again. It seemed they couldn't quite live together, but they also couldn't stay apart. This second attempt lasted another 7 years until they divorced for the final time in 1970. During these years, their home became a domestic battleground. They argued constantly, and the normal life they wanted felt more like a prison of shouting and resentment. Rodney later admitted that these years were some of the most difficult of his life. If you ever wondered where his famous, biting jokes about his wife and his home life came from, they were born during this time. He wasn't just making things up for the stage, he was pulling from the real bitterness and frustration he felt while living in New Jersey. The jokes were his way of talking about how unhappy he actually was. Together, they had 2 children, a son named Brian and a daughter named Melanie. Despite the chaos of the marriage, Rodney took his role as a father very seriously. After Joyce eventually passed away, Rodney took over full responsibility for the children. As a single father, he had to balance his burgeoning career with the daily needs of raising 2 kids on his own. He wanted to make sure they had a more stable life than he did, even though he was still struggling with his own internal demons. Now we'll see how all that frustration turned into a genius plan to make the world laugh. Crafting the one-liner. When Rodney Dangerfield finally returned to comedy in his 40s, he didn't just tell jokes, he engineered them. He was a perfectionist who treated every sentence like a puzzle that had to be solved. His process was built on a very simple habit. He always carried a pen and a scrap of paper in his pocket. No matter where he was at dinner, in a taxi, or at a grocery store, if a funny thought crossed his mind, he wrote it down immediately. He didn't trust his memory to hold on to an idea. Once he had a joke on paper, he would spend weeks or even months refining it. He would change a single word, move a comma, or adjust the timing of a pause until the joke was as short and powerful as possible. He believed that the fewer words a joke had, the harder the audience would laugh. This dedication to getting things right extended to how he handled new topics. In the late 1990s, when the drug Viagra first became popular, Rodney wanted to write jokes about it. However, he didn't want to tell a joke that people wouldn't understand. He actually spent time monitoring internet trends and reading about how popular the topic was. He wanted to make sure that enough people knew exactly what the drug was before he ever mentioned it on stage. Once he felt the audience was literate enough on the subject, he wrote a joke and immediately booked himself on The Tonight Show. He did this because he was afraid another comedian might think of a similar joke and tell it first. He wanted to be the first one to deliver it, so it would be original. On stage, Rodney had a very specific way of moving and looking. He became famous for pulling at his red tie, sweating heavily, and making his eyes look very wide and bug-eyed. While this looked like an act, it was actually a physical manifestation of real tension. Rodney was naturally a very anxious person. Even after he became a superstar, he still felt a great deal of pressure every time he walked out to perform. By pulling his tie and fidgeting, he was letting that nervous energy out. This physicality helped the audience believe his character. When he said he got no respect, he looked like a man who was genuinely stressed out by life, which made his one-liners feel more authentic. What made Rodney truly special was that he managed to produce a phenomenal quantity of material without ever losing quality. Many comedians have one good show that they perform for years, but Rodney was constantly writing new things. He had thousands of jokes, yet each one was polished to perfection. He would go to small comedy clubs late at night just to test one new line. If the audience didn't laugh hard enough, he would go back home, change a word, and try the next night again. He never stopped working because he truly loved the craft of making people laugh. Next, we will look at how Rodney built his own comedy club to give other famous stars their big break. Dangerfield's Comedy Club. By 1969, Rodney Dangerfield was finally becoming a household name, but he was tired of traveling constantly to perform in other people's venues. He decided to take a big risk and build his own home base. He partnered with a friend and opened a comedy club in New York City, simply named Dangerfield's. Unlike many other clubs at the time, Rodney designed this place to be a true institution for the art of stand-up. He wanted a venue where the focus was entirely on the performer and the jokes. Because he owned the club, he had total control over the environment, which allowed him to create a space that felt both professional and intimate. It quickly became one of the most famous comedy spots in the world. The club served a very important purpose beyond just being a place to watch a show. It was a laboratory for televised comedy. During the 1970s and 1980s, HBO was becoming a major force in entertainment. Rodney used his club to host several legendary comedy specials. These shows weren't just good for his own No Respect brand, they changed how people watched comedy at home. Because the club had such a great atmosphere, the energy of the live audience translated perfectly to the TV screen. This helped make Rodney an even bigger star, as millions of people could now see his act without traveling to Manhattan. One of the most admirable things about Rodney was his kingmaker streak. Even though he had spent decades struggling to get noticed, he wasn't bitter toward younger performers. In fact, he was incredibly altruistic, which means he enjoyed helping others without expecting anything in return. He used his club and his TV specials to launch the careers of comedians who had counterculture styles, meaning they were a bit different or more intense than the mainstream acts. He was instrumental in discovering stars like Jim Carrey, Sam Kinison, and Tim Allen. Rodney had a great eye for talent and would often give these newcomers a stage when no one else would. He believed that if someone was funny, they deserved a chance to be seen. Rodney also had a deep professional respect for the work itself. Even when he became very wealthy and could have easily retired to a beach somewhere, he refused to stop working. He didn't do it for the money. He did it because he genuinely loved the process of performing. He was often the hardest working person in the room. When he wasn't on stage at his own club, he was in the back room writing or helping other comics refine their timing. He stayed active in the comedy scene well into his 80s, proving that his passion for making people laugh was stronger than his desire for a quiet life. Now we'll see how a surprise meeting in a flower shop led to the most stable relationship of Rodney's life. Joan Child's influence. After the years of noise and fighting in his first marriage, Rodney Dangerfield found a completely different kind of peace in 1983. It all started when he walked into a flower shop in Santa Monica called Child's of London. He wasn't there for a movie role or a comedy sketch. He was just a customer. The owner of the shop was Joan Child, a flower importer who was 30 years younger than him. Rodney was immediately taken with her, but it wasn't just a quick crush. He kept coming back to the shop, and eventually the two began a relationship that would last for the rest of his life. They finally married in 1993, a decade after they first met. Joan was a stabilizing presence, which was something Rodney had never really experienced before. His earlier life had been full of chaos and people who struggled with their own problems. Joan was very different. She was a Mormon and a teetotaler, which means she did not drink alcohol at all. While Rodney still had his own habits and his long-term use of cannabis, Joan provided a calm, steady foundation for him to come home to. She didn't try to change him, but her organized and quiet lifestyle helped balance out his high-energy, anxious personality. For the first time, Rodney had a partner who was focused on his well-being and the health of his business. One of the most surprising things about their partnership was how Joan helped Rodney embrace the future. She was a digital pioneer. In 1995, long before most celebrities understood what the internet was, Joan helped Rodney launch his own official website. This was a massive deal at the time. It made Rodney the first major celebrity to have a personal home on the web. Joan saw the potential for Rodney to talk directly to his fans without needing a middleman. She helped manage his online presence, ensuring that his jokes reached a whole new generation of people who were just starting to use computers. Their relationship was so unique that it even inspired Rodney's creative work. In 2000, Rodney starred in a movie called My 5 Wives. The idea for the film came from his fascination with Joan's background and the different cultures they both came from. While the movie was a comedy with a wild plot about a man ending up with 5 wives, the heart of the project was based on the deep bond and the interesting conversations he had with Joan about her life and her family. He loved telling stories that reflected his own experiences, and his life with Joan gave him plenty of fresh material. Even though Joan brought him a lot of happiness, Rodney still struggled with a deep sadness that he kept hidden from the world for a very long time. Next, we will look at the secret battle Rodney fought inside his own mind while he was making everyone else laugh. Man versus persona. Rodney Dangerfield had a complicated relationship with the character he played. This struggle is often called the persona trap. When you watch old clips of him on The Tonight Show, you will notice that he rarely dropped the act. Even when he sat down on the couch to talk with the host, he stayed in character. He would pull his tie, sweat, and look around nervously, as if he were still doing his stand-up routine. He did this during almost every public outing. Because he was so committed to being Rodney, the public rarely got to see the real man, Jack Roy. He felt that if he stopped being funny for even a minute, the audience might lose interest in him. This constant need to perform came from a very deep place. For Rodney, show business was a survival mechanism. Because his mother was so cold and never showed him any love, he looked for that affection from strangers. When a crowd of hundreds of people laughed and cheered for him, it felt like a substitute for the maternal love he missed as a child. He needed the roar of the crowd to feel like he was worth something. If the audience loved Rodney Dangerfield, then maybe, in some way, Jack Roy was lovable too. Interestingly, Rodney actually believed a lot of what he said on stage. He didn't just pretend to be a loser. He had a deep internal belief that he truly was one. Despite his fame, his hit movies, and his successful business, he still felt like the unloved boy from New York. This is why his no respect character felt so real to people. He wasn't just telling jokes, he was sharing his honest view of himself. He felt like a loser in his own mind, so playing one on stage felt natural. This created a strange separation struggle. Rodney would often get offended or upset if people treated him like his character in real life. He wanted people to respect him as a serious man and a smart businessman. However, because he never offered the public a glimpse of the real Jack Roy, people had no choice but to treat him like the no-respect guy. He wanted to be seen as a person, but he was too afraid to take off the mask of the performer. While he struggled with who he really was, he was also fighting a physical and mental battle with his own health. Next, we will look at the long shadow that depression and a 60-year habit cast over his life. Depression and cannabis. For most of his life, Rodney Dangerfield was a master at hiding his true feelings. Behind the loud suits and the famous jokes was a man dealing with severe depression. This was a silent struggle that started when he was only 15 years old. Even though he was famous and made millions of people smile, he felt a deep sadness almost every day. He didn't tell the public about this for over 50 years. It wasn't until he wrote his autobiography in the 1990s that he finally admitted how much he had been suffering. For decades, the world saw a funny man, but he was actually fighting a very dark battle inside his own head. To deal with this pain, Rodney turned to cannabis. He started using it in 1942 and continued for 60 years. This created a complicated situation between self-medication and professional therapy. Rodney did go to mental health counseling, and he actually told people that therapy was very helpful for his depression. However, he refused to stop using cannabis, even when doctors suggested that the drug might be causing other problems. He felt he couldn't let it go. He was using therapy to talk about his feelings, but he was using cannabis to numb his physical sensations. This habit caused a lot of trouble, especially in hospitals. Rodney was so dependent on cannabis that he insisted on smoking it even when he was a patient in a medical room. This led to hospital incidents where he got into trouble with the staff and the law. Most hospitals have strict rules against smoking because of oxygen tanks and the health of other patients, but Rodney felt he couldn't function without it. He was willing to risk legal friction and social embarrassment just to keep using the substance. The reason he held onto it so tightly was because of what we can call an anxiety anchor. While therapy helped him understand his depression, he suffered from intense physical anxiety. He believed that cannabis was the only thing capable of lowering his anxiety floor, the constant level of nervousness he felt in his body. He felt that without it, his heart would race and his mind would spin out of control. To him, the drug wasn't for fun. It was a tool he believed he needed just to feel normal and calm enough to speak to people. In his final days, the person who stayed by his side through all this stress was his wife, Joan. Now, let's look at the emotional moments when Rodney's health finally began to fail. Joan's final vigil. In the final months of 2004, the lively world of Rodney Dangerfield became very quiet. After undergoing a heart valve replacement surgery in August, his body began a steady post-surgery decline. Instead of recovering as everyone hoped, Rodney suffered a series of small strokes. To make things more difficult, he also developed infectious complications that his body was too weak to fight. He spent much of this time in a coma at the UCLA Medical Center, with his wife, Joan Child, staying by his side every single day. During this difficult time, Joan shared a story that became known as the coma kiss. Even though Rodney was unresponsive for a long period, there was a brief, miraculous moment where he seemed to wake up. According to Joan, he emerged from his coma just long enough to look at her, squeeze her hand, and kiss her. This small gesture was a powerful goodbye, showing that even in his final days, his love for Joan was still there. Shortly after this moment, he slipped back into unconsciousness. On October 5, 2004, Rodney Dangerfield passed away peacefully at the age of 82. The scene at the medical center was somber as his family gathered to say their final farewells. For Joan and his children, it was the end of a long journey with a man who was as complicated as he was funny. The news of his death quickly spread across the world, leaving a giant hole in the comedy community. After he passed, an eccentric detail emerged about how Joan chose to remember her husband. Rodney was famous for how hard he worked, often sweating through his suits during his high-energy performances. Joan actually kept a small bottle of Rodney's sweat in the refrigerator. To some, this might seem strange, but for Joan, it was a tactile memento of his legendary work ethic. It was a physical reminder of the literal blood, sweat, and tears he put into his career to make sure the world finally gave him the respect he deserved. Now, we'll look at the very last time Rodney stood on a stage and the one thing he wished he could change about his life. Next, we will look at his final birthday performance and his thoughts on a long career. The final curtain. Rodney Dangerfield's final years were a mix of health scares and a stubborn refusal to stop performing. On November 22, 2001, Rodney was scheduled to perform on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. This date was special because it was his 81st birthday. However, while he was there to perform his stand-up act, he suffered a heart attack. It was a scary moment for his fans and family, as the man who spent his life making people laugh was suddenly fighting for his life on what should have been a celebratory day. Rodney was not a man who gave up easily. He went through a recovery process and, incredibly, returned to The Tonight Show exactly 1 year later on his 81st birthday. He called this his triumphant return. He wanted to prove that he still had the energy and the wit to command a stage, regardless of his age or his heart health. For that one night, it seemed like he had beaten the odds. Unfortunately, his health continued to decline over the next few years. In August 2004, Rodney underwent surgery to replace a heart valve. Doctors hoped this would give him more years of life, but the recovery did not go well. He suffered from various complications, including a series of small strokes and infections. His body, which had worked so hard for 82 years, was finally starting to shut down. He fell into a coma and eventually passed away on October 5, 2004. When people look back at his life, they often wonder if he had any regrets. Despite the no-respect character who complained about everything, Rodney actually had a very positive view of his work. His only real regret was that he didn't become successful sooner. He spent so many years selling siding and driving trucks that he felt he missed out on decades of performing. He simply wished he had more time to be on stage and make people laugh. To him, the laughter of the audience was the best respect he ever received. Enjoyed this video? Like and subscribe for more celebrity breakdowns. What is your favorite Rodney one-liner? Let us know in the comments.